Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's Will here. I'm a medical student, Mandarin coach, and also a fluent speaker of Mandarin Chinese. If you're new to the channel, this channel is mainly focusing on language learning and also improving our learning efficiency in other topics too. In this video, I want to delve into a topic that I haven't really talked about in detail before, and that is learning Chinese grammar. One of the reasons I wanted to cover this topic was because I find a lot of learners and teachers alike will say that Chinese has no grammar, or that Chinese grammar is very simple, there's no need to learn it. So in this video, I want to talk about why I actually think Chinese grammar is deceptively tricky. And I also want to share with you guys some of the techniques and tricks that I use to try and help me master Chinese sentence structure, which is a problem for many learners. So guys, make sure to watch this video through to the end to try and get the most out of it. And also, if you're interested, I do actually have a Black Friday special offer that I'm going to be talking about at the end. I've also linked that in the description below if you're interested. First off, let's bust the repeated myth that Chinese doesn't have any grammar. Mandarin Chinese, just like any other natural spoken language, has a unique set of grammar rules that underpin its structure, and when such rules that underpin the sentence structure are violated, the results are often incomprehensible, or at least sound a bit odd or strange to the native ear. What's more, learning natural sounding Chinese grammar is actually something that comes with many challenges and is very difficult to achieve in practice. One of the reasons that many people seem to think that Chinese grammar is very easy is because it doesn't have any of these other concepts that you might find in, for example, European languages, such as conjugations, plurals, tenses, etc. Now, I have to admit, this actually gives us a significant advantage as Chinese learners because, yes, Chinese is void of these conjugations or difficulties in remembering how to form plurals or form tenses, etc. So you can kind of put your conjugation tables to one side because you're not going to need them. In another way, this actually makes it a bit trickier, as Chinese relies on set patterns in order to convey meaning, and sometimes it can be very hard to predict how a native speaker would actually express a specific idea by just knowing the grammar rules alone. So unless you know the specific sentence structure or pattern to use in a certain circumstance, it's likely that you're going to get it wrong, or at least sound not that native when constructing a new sentence in Chinese. So let's look at our first example. If you're speaking to someone who tells you their age and you think they look a lot younger than they actually are, how would you express this in Chinese? If you don't know the specific phrase that Chinese people would tend to use in this situation because you haven't been exposed to it, or for whatever reason you just don't know it, then you might try and rely on grammar rules or other things you've learned previously to try and concoct a sentence to express this idea. So English, your native language, may end up influencing the sentence that you create in this situation, and you might end up with something like this. Now, although it's difficult to put your finger on a specific grammar rule that this sentence violates, it just sounds odd and awkward. No one would ever say this in Chinese, and it sounds very like you're translating from English. It doesn't really make sense. And you might even find that some native speakers have difficulty understanding this if you said it to them. On the other hand, if you were to hang around with enough native speakers and encounter this circumstance, this situation enough times, you might know that native speakers would tend to say something like this. 哎呀，我真看不出来啊. And if you were to say this, obviously this would sound a lot more natural and a lot more easily understood than the sentence that we demonstrated before. This isn't a one-off example, this happens in pretty much any sentence that you come up with in Chinese. And so for that reason, just relying on learning a few grammar rules in the textbook may not be the ultimate, and then trying to predict how Chinese people would express a certain idea may not be the best solution to our problems and might cause ourselves more problems than it's actually worth. Now, just for the record here, I really don't want to say I'm against learning grammar rules entirely. I think having some explicit learning, and I will list some resources below, things that I've used, especially when focusing on sentence patterns and specific sentence structures that Chinese people use, I think explicit learning can really be useful. However, here I just want to emphasize, I don't want you guys to fall into the trap of just trying to memorize when you would use a certain sentence structure. And like, for example, you might try and memorize, oh, I need to use 虽然但是 when I'm trying to express contrast. But when you're trying to speak a language, you're not, like, for example, when you're speaking English or your mother tongue, you're not thinking, oh, I want to express contrast now, what do I use? 虽然但是 and then try and use it. You don't have time to do that. So I wouldn't recommend learning grammar in that way. However, getting lots and lots of examples and using them in the method that I'm going to describe a bit later in this video is probably a really good idea. So back to the issue at hand, what can we actually do about this problem that I just described previously? Well, the lazy solution that most learners use is trying to construct sentences based on English sentence patterns, English sentence structure. And some teachers will even let students get away with this, probably because of the cultural difference, or that teachers are so used to hearing this kind of butchered English influenced Chinese. Sadly, Chinese teachers have often been exposed to a lot of this kind of dodgy sentence structure in Chinese, and for that reason they're pretty much immune to it. They don't really respond to it in the same way a native speaker who's never heard that way of expressing something might do. And for that reason, it's really important to try and get your teacher to correct all of your mistakes, especially regarding sentence structure. I was recently speaking to my friend and language coach Misha about this problem, and he brought up an example that he faced a while ago. I think this example really neatly illustrates the point that we're talking about today. So Misha, he was pretty fluent at the time of having this conversation, and he wanted to express the idea to a native speaker that he wanted to record the conversation so then he could obviously use that later for learning and for progress. This was one of the first times Misha actually realized he had a bit of a problem with sentence structure. So when he went to express the idea that I've just mentioned, this is what he said to the native speaker. 我想录我们的对话. He took the sentence in English, I want to record our conversation, and translated it quite literally into Chinese. 我想录我们的对话. Now for poor Misha, he was pretty sure that he hadn't made any tone mistakes or hadn't made anything blatant errors, yet the language exchange partner that he was talking to was quite confused. So he repeated it slowly and clearly again and again. 我想录我们的对话. Still, having repeated it, there was no luck, and he finally resorted to saying the sentence in English and asking the native speaker to tell him how to express it in a better way in Chinese, and his friend's face lit up. And then she said, oh, you want to say 我想把我们的对话录下来. So after this experience, Misha actually realized that his sentence structure issues were probably somewhat more widespread than he had previously imagined. So Misha wanted to do something about this, and eventually the solution he found was similar to the method that I used from the start to help me nail Chinese sentence structure. And the method is really simple, it's called sentence mining. So what exactly is sentence mining? Well, I've talked about it in loads of other videos, which I'm going to link, and you guys can definitely check them out. But basically, collecting and drilling hundreds or even thousands of example sentences in order to help you try and express yourself more like a native speaker. And ideally these sentences are then imported into a spaced repetition system to help you review them at intervals that makes it optimal for retention. The reason we've both found this to work so well for Mandarin in particular is precisely because Mandarin doesn't have any conjugations or any tenses in the same way that European languages do. So instead of memorizing conjugations or memorizing grammar rules, you can collect hundreds of authentic expressions that clearly demonstrate a certain grammar or grammar point or sentence structure in the Mandarin language. So once you learn how to express an idea in first person, it obviously becomes very easy to then express that for he, she, or it, or they, etc. Without the worries that you would have in European language regarding conjugations. So let's go back to the sentence that Misha got wrong. What he realized, having learned the correct sentence and getting that feedback from the native speaker, that he could then use this in other situations. He could easily use the same structure and tweak it to say to his friends, oh, do you want to record our conversation? 你想把我们的对话录下来吗? After a few weeks of sentence mining, Misha noticed a massive improvement in his ability to construct sentences accurately, and improvement in his ability to master Chinese sentence structure. And within a few months, he had started to develop Yugan, this deeper sense and intuitive sense of the language, of how to use it in a way that's similar to native speakers. So armed with this new tool in his arsenal, Misha found that he could now go away and collect hundreds of example sentences, learn how to use them flexibly and interchangeably, and then express new ideas in doing so. So I often get asked what my biggest secret is to learning Chinese fast. And aside from the fact that I'm not particularly good at keeping secrets, I've kind of shared this, and that's what my whole channel is about. I'd say, apart from all the input, all the conversations that I had with native speakers, etc., the biggest key for me was actually going away and doing this sentence mining to retain what I was learning. So from near enough the beginning of my Chinese learning journey, or at least very early on, I started taking whole phrases and whole sentences and learning them. And this really helped me because within a few months, I was able to, like I mentioned with Misha before, develop this Yugan. And then after a year and a half, I was pretty much able to express most of the ideas that I would need in daily life. And even now, where I've reached a pretty decent level in Mandarin, I still practice this method every day to improve even further and to try and learn new vocabulary, new phrases in context. So how exactly should you go about sentence mining? Well, I've made a few videos on this in action before, and if you have any more questions about it, you can even head over to those videos and leave me a comment, or you can give me a comment here and I'll try my best to answer them. But as I did mention at the beginning, I do actually have a sentence mining masterclass which myself and Misha run, and we are doing a Black Friday deal in which the code to get the discount 25% off all our different masterclasses, including the one on sentence mining, which is going to take place on the 26th of November. You can check out the discount code in the description below and go and get your place. So I'd really look forward to seeing you there. So this masterclass will actually be taking a deep dive into sentence mining and the best methods and ways of doing so in order to be more efficient in your learning journey. After the session is over, myself and Misha will also be staying behind for a Q&A. So you're more than welcome to save your questions as well till then and talk to them. You're more than welcome to save your questions until then and also ask them in person. Well, not quite in person, it's over Zoom, I'm afraid. So yeah, if you're interested in any of those things, please do go to the description and check that out. But thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate your support. And hopefully we'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.